A few months ago, I tried out Tim Scheer's burn and turn drum smoker method for pork ribs, and they turned out so amazing that one viewer said, "Hey Steve, I wonder if that would work with beef ribs." Well, challenge accepted. In this video, I'm gonna cook some beef short ribs using the burn and turn method, and we're gonna see if it actually works, so let's get smoking. Welcome to the Smoke Lab, guys. I'm Steve Gao, and on this show, I do crazy barbecue experiments you would never do at home, so you can learn from my trial and error. Hot and fast beef short ribs. I've honestly never done them before. I prefer to do low and slow cooking, but after I watched Tim Scheer's burn and turn pork rib method, which I'll link in the description section below, it really converted me on the benefits of hot and fast for at least pork ribs. I really love the intense grilled meat flavor that it imparts on the ribs, so I also think it could work well for beef short ribs, but we won't know until we try. I'm starting by slathering a rack of beef short ribs with soy sauce as a binder and to add some extra flavor, and now I'm whipping out some Smoke Trails barbecue brisket rub and applying it to the ribs. Finally, I'm putting down a finishing layer of Oklahoma Joe's Memphis style barbecue rub. I really like this rub, and the ribs will now sit on the counter for an hour while I go outside to light up the Bronco. To do that, I'm filling the charcoal basket with briquettes and lighting one side of the pile with my Oklahoma Joe's charcoal lighter. This thing makes lighting a drum smoker an absolute breeze, and it gets right down in there with the flame, which is super handy. Now that's gonna smoke away with all of the vents wide open until I get to around 325 degrees Fahrenheit on the built-in thermometer on the Bronco, and then I'm closing the intake vent down to setting number 1 to lock in that temperature. I'm grabbing the ribs now and placing the ribs meat side down on the grate. They should sizzle a little bit, and I'm setting my alarm for 15 minutes. 15 minutes later, I'm opening the lid and flipping the ribs over. I use tongs here, but they kind of messed up the bark a little bit. They're already getting a nice sear, and the smell is great, so that's a really good sign. I'm gonna close the lid and let these cook for another 15 minutes. 15 minutes later, I'm doing flip number 2. I found using nitrile over cotton gloves works a lot better for flipping beef short ribs because, as I said before, the tongs were messing up the bark and the seared fat on top. 15 minutes later, I'm flipping them a third time, and the top of the ribs are getting a really nice sear. So far, so good. Another 15 minutes later, it's flip number 4, and another 15 minutes later, it's flip number 5. We're now at 75 minutes in. You can see how the fat cap is bubbling, and it's getting really well seared now. Flip numero 6 and 7 takes us to an hour and 45 minutes, and the ribs are developing a really nice pronounced crust at this point. Flip 8 and 9 takes us to the 2 hours and 15 minute mark, and the ribs are really pulling back from the bone now, and they're at about 165 to 170 degrees internal. Flip number 10 takes us to the 2.5 hour mark, and the ribs look like this. Nice sear and crust. It's not super dark, so I'd actually recommend adding some wood chunks. I didn't do that in this video because I thought the charcoal would add enough color, but I think it could use some extra wood chunks. Also, as you can see, there's quite a bit of pullback on the bone, so I'd recommend just going for 2 hours instead of 2 hours and 30 minutes like I did, and then hopefully the meat won't pull back from the bones as much as it did in this video. Now I'm laying down some clarified butter on a few sheets of heavy-duty aluminum foil, laying the ribs meat side down on the butter and wrapping them up in such a way that they are easy to unwrap because I'll be checking them really often. 30 minutes later, I'm unwrapping them and checking them for tenderness. As I press my thumb into the top of the short ribs, I'm getting a lot of bounce back. Fibers are pushing back a lot, so these ribs definitely need more time. Another 15 minutes later, I'm checking them again. They're still too bouncy and they're not done, so every 15 minutes, I'm going to keep testing them. It took an hour and a half of checking them every 15 minutes until they were perfectly done, so I could push my finger or thumb through the meat and it didn't immediately bounce back. If the fibers yield to your thumb or your finger as you poke it in and they don't immediately bounce back, then that's a really clear sign that the short ribs are done. Now, I wanted to get some more color and bark on the ribs, so I'm putting them back on the Bronco at around 225 degrees, so pretty low, for another 30 minutes to an hour. An hour later, they're coming off the Bronco and getting rested down to 140 degrees, around an hour and a half. These short ribs look amazing, so it's time for the taste test. All right, guys, these beef ribs have rested down and they're looking pretty good. I was worried about that bark, but it really firmed up when I put it on the smoker for the last kind of 30 minutes or so. It doesn't look as dark as my normal low and slow offset smoker beef ribs, but it's still looking pretty good. All right, let's slice into this guy. And I'm just gonna do all of the ribs at the same time. So let's take a look. Look at that. That looks absolutely beautiful. Loving it. Now there is a smoke ring, so it did get some smoke. That's a good sign. It didn't penetrate all the way past the fat cap, but the fat cap is pretty well rendered. It's nice and squishy. Let's give this guy a taste. This is really good. It's super tender. It's got a nice grilled meat flavor on the fat cap that I don't think a lot of low and slow smoked beef ribs have. It has something a little bit different, but I noticed that it has a little bit less smoke flavor. What I could have done to get a little bit more smoke flavor is put some wood chunks on during the entire cook. That could have potentially helped, but as it stands right now, really forward grilled meat flavor that tastes absolutely amazing. Steaky, prime ribby, really forward Maillard reaction, but really subdued on the smoke flavor. And in case you guys are wondering, it's not dry at all. It pulls apart like nothing. It's perfectly cooked, so we got the perfect tenderness. That is the important thing, and as a result, it's just fall apart, but still has some structure so it stays on the bone. You don't want it falling off the bone because then it doesn't really look like a cool dino rib. So there's some of the fibers. You can see how they just pull apart. Delicious. Let's get another bite of the fat cap here. Yeah, it tastes like a grilled steak. Really good, really loving the flavor. Just doesn't have the depth of smoke flavor that I normally get from low and slow offset smoker smoked beef ribs. So burn and turn beef short ribs, do they work? Absolutely. I think this is a great proof of concept. They're just as tender as a low and slow smoked beef rib if you keep checking near the end and you get the perfect tenderness. If you don't, you could overcook it quite easily, and you could undercook it if you're not constantly checking and you pull it when it's not quite tender. So it is a little bit more of an advanced method. The other thing is you don't get as much smoke flavor on it as a low and slow smoked beef short rib, but you make up for it with the intense grilled meat steaky flavor that is absolutely delicious. And it's very unique. You don't get that same flavor on a low and slow smoked beef short rib. So I'm liking this method a lot. Thanks again to Tim Scheer from Blues Hog for the inspiration for this technique. Again, I'll link his YouTube channel in the description section below. Now, if you have any ideas for future Smoke Lab videos, let me know in the description section below. This video was a direct request from a viewer who commented on my burn and turn pork ribs video. So I do read the comment section and I do take your suggestions if they sound like cool ideas. Don't forget to subscribe to the Oklahoma Joe's YouTube channel. I will see you in the next video, and until then, happy smoking.